bit. Okay. So I'm Emily. I'm here with Jordan, and we're talking about chapters 7 and 8 in the video Women in the West. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what stood out most from the video, like the big concept that you took from the video?
Mine was basically to me, it was like they were showing the pioneers. They were the first, not just women, but overall to really start a movement out there.
I would say that for me, it's that they showed that women had their own way then. Like I think it was 39:42 in the video. They talked about how women during this time worked in their own way to fight for women's rights. Like Annie Oakley, how they said that she was able to show that she could do things as good as a man, but she was never really threatening about it like some of the suffragists were.
Yeah.
She was more just confident, and I thought that was really cool that the women then, they understood their responsibilities, and they understood that they didn't always have to, get in a man's face and say, look, I'm as good as you. But to survive, that's what they needed to do, was to take on men's work.
Right. It's like she found a new way to raise awareness about equality without demanding it. I thought that was really awesome.
And then in 43:30 of the video, they said that it led to more rights and political advancements because it talked about how the Western states were more of the ones that started getting women to vote and starting letting women be on juries and things like that. So I think that's what had a lot to do with it, is they realized that women could run their own homes. Like what was her name in the video? The woman that got shot with the buckshot in the face because she said that she didn't want the outlaw on her land anymore.
Was that Belle Starr?
Yes, thank you. Drawing a blank.
I know. I was trying to think. I was like, okay, I'm trying to remember.
I should have written that one down. Okay, so what was the reaction that women received during this time for their actions? Which, I mean, we kind of sort of scraped upon, but,
Yeah, I don't really think they were, I guess, shunned or looked down upon or anything, but it was kind of like all right, they're having their moment kind of thing. Like, they never saw them as, like you said, they never saw them as a threat. They just kind of thought, well, we'll let them have their time, but they know that men rule. That's just kind of the way I took it.
I took it because in 259 of the movie, it said women in the West face challenges while still being stereotyped as inferior. So I think, like, at the beginning of everything, when they first started, like, the gold towns and things like that, when women would show up to try to find husbands or to follow their husbands, that was the big stereotype, was that they weren't as good and they were simply trying to find the surplus of men or trying to stay with men. But then as they realized that some of the, I guess, sketchier characters in the West that were like, Annie Oakley and things like that, where they would look at them and be like, that's almost not ladylike. Those were the women that kind of paved the way and took that stereotype and threw it away, which is really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right on that one.
Let's see. Oh yeah, and like in 1942 of the movie, it said, women such as Belle Starr used to attract more fame in dime novels, even if not totally 100% accurate. So that makes me believe that the whole role of the new kind of bad woman in the West was starting to get really popular. Like, they thought that they could really sell that, even though it wasn't true.
Oh yeah, just like they were talking about the term cowgirls, how demeaning it was, and I really never thought of it that as a demeaning term. I just thought it was, to me, I thought cowgirls was just as equal as cowboys, so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Maybe I could kind of see it almost like in today's terms when you don't really want to be called a tomboy. Some girls, they have a problem with that. Maybe it's kind of the same thing.
Well, that's true. I hadn't thought about that.
But, yeah. Okay. Next question. What was an interesting fact from the video and why?
Interesting fact I liked was how diverse Calamity Jane was, because everybody knows about Annie Oakley and how famous she was, but I think Calamity Jane was kind of put on the down low. I don't know why, but considering she was a stagecoach driver, military scout, what was it, a bullwhacker and all that stuff. And I was like, gosh, she's doing like 10 times what Annie Oakley ever thought she, ever did. And I was really surprised.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting too. And also, her, the whole tie up where did she have a legitimate child with Wild Bill Hickok? Did she not? Who was
Right.
the actual father? Like, did she even have a child? Where did the child go? Like, I thought that was interesting that through all of the stuff that she was said to have done, that was somewhere in the mix. Maybe.
Maybe we'll find out. I know. I thought about researching it after watching the video just to see if I could find out.
But it's just the folklore behind her and Belle Starr. I thought that was really cool because you don't know what all's true and what all isn't. And I mean, how did those women gain that kind of notoriety? Was it just like they talked about how Calamity Jane would show up in bars and get really drunk? Is it just that she just kind of people thought that she could appeal to that kind of thing? I don't know.
Right. I guess she was just they were just that stand out. They were just able to, I guess, make their stance without making a stance. I guess you could say.
Well, I think too. They said that Calamity Jane, her appearances were so rough that she could pass for a man, and that's how she was able to do the whole military scout and things like that. So
True.
maybe they had to have a reason for why she looked like that. I don't know.
Since she wasn't pretty, she had to do something to make up for it.
Yeah. I think for me, 426 of the video, it said only 10% of women in the gold rush, or were in the gold rush at first, but it quickly turned to half and half. I guess as more women, they were kind of reluctant at first, and as they started writing their friends and, actually surviving, more showed up. And they also probably realized that they're not going to get a husband if all the guys are going out west. So.
Yeah, I mean, single moms got to do something.
But then I saw but then I saw too that a lot of women were opening up businesses and things like that out west too. So it wasn't all just to find a husband, which was really cool because that also kind of, I guess, plays into the whole independence part where if you can go out there and they need businesses, they're not going to discriminate if you're a man or a woman and you can open one. Why not?
Right. And it wasn't just like what most people think. Like if you think of Old West times, most people think all brothels. Because there was like scarce women out there, but it wasn't. It was like pharmacies and post office and actual legitimate positions and businesses, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I thought they were also, I don't know if it was in the textbook or in the video, but it was talking about how even women of different races were able to, in some areas, open up their businesses and be just as legitimate as white women at that time. Just because, I mean, the West was a place where you could go and be someone entirely different and break stereotypes and just survive because that's what everybody was trying to do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then I also found it interesting in 718 of the video, it said 1 out of 5 pioneer women on the trail were pregnant. And it even discussed how like that was a big problem because people died by the masses. And that was one of the reasons. I mean, I couldn't imagine that being pregnant and having to sit in the back of a covered wagon and hope you didn't deliver your baby on a bumpy road.
I know. I mean, people think it's bad now if you can't make it to a hospital. I couldn't even begin to imagine what these poor women had. And I mean, let's face it, most of the people, when they were on that trail, if they were pregnant, they already had probably 2, 3, 4 kids in the back too. So it was like 10 times worse. I couldn't put myself through, I'll tell you.
I tell you what, my husband goes over a bump right now and I have acid reflux. I look at him like, no. Those women must have had some grit having to walk beside the wagon, hoping their water didn't break, hoping something didn't happen with their other babies. And like the one woman talking about how there was like rain up to her knees and she had to help at times put her baby down on the ground while she was guiding her other baby that was kind of sort of walking to get the wagon out of the road that was stuck. I was like, no.
They got guts. I'll give them that.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be able to.
No.
Okay, so what was that? I'm sorry.
I got one, and that one's hard enough. I couldn't imagine what they had to go through.
So, last question. What's a text quote that related to the video?
I had a hard time with this question. I really couldn't think of a good one that would really relate to the movie that we saw.
I found one on page 356. It says, women decided to leave their homelands and come to the United States for many reasons, some of which they shared with men. Faced with poverty, limited opportunity, and rigid class structures at home, families dispatched members to work in the United States and send money back to those who remained. The booming U.S. economy had an insatiable need for workers in its factories, mines, and kitchens, and it lured men and women alike with its promises of high wages and easy prosperity. So that made me kind of think that the whole purpose of the video, yes, it kind of concentrated on women a whole bunch, but it also focused, that gave me more of the reasons as to why. Like, a lot of the women may have been immigrants, and they realized that a lot of the jobs, in the East Coast was completely taken by people that were already here, or they wanted the gold rush money, or, something easy like that. Well, not easy, but something more available, I guess. And that was the way that they would go about it.
Well, that's true. And if you think about it, it's still going on today with all the foreigners, whether like from Iran or even Mexico, they're still coming over here for the American dream, just like they were back in those days.
Right. I mean, I can see that too, because there's different laws. Like, during the early 1900s, you had the things in Russia that were going on where it was kind of like the communist whole thing was taken over, and I could see people sitting there going, yeah, I can't handle this anymore, and there's a whole bunch of land going up out west, and, why not? Let's do it. And it just seemed like even though there were all sorts of scary things about Indians and, outlaws and things like that, they may have thought that they had a better chance facing all of that.
Yeah. And a lot of them didn't have nothing to risk. It was usually either just them or just them and a spouse, no one to back home to have to worry about too. So what have they got to lose at that point?
There were also several things in the textbook when it talked about immigration. It discussed how some women in other countries, they would get pregnant before they were married, or they would do something to disgrace their families, and their families would send them away to America, and that was the only way that they could kind of live it down, was being away from everybody. So,
yeah, basically outcasted.
Yeah. But I mean, America's a good place to be outcasted, I guess, during that time, because there was money just laying around to be picked up if you had the right attitude about it.
True. That's true. Even though we were technically, most people were poor, going through the Depression and all that, I mean, we were still a prosperous country overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did you like the video as a whole?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, not just because of the whole women aspect, but I enjoy anything about the West anyway. So it was kind of like a win-win for me. But finding out a little bit more about the women, I thought was pretty cool. Like I said, Calamity Jane was my favorite, just for the fact that she's kind of one of those, she's known, but she's not the known one that everybody thinks about. And finding more and more about her, how I think she was really more important to a quote movement than Annie Oakley was. Annie Oakley was more of a face versus, I think of Calamity Jane like the backbone of it all.
Right. And see, I saw it a little bit differently, because I saw Annie Oakley where you needed that kind of, how Jacqueline Kennedy was kind of like the face of womanhood back in the 50s. You needed that for, people to understand that women, because like, I could see Calamity Jane for some of the people being a little bit too harsh, and so they wouldn't accept it. But Annie Oakley, she was an entertainer. She was like how people today look at movie stars and things like that. You really just aspired to be like her, which I thought was really cool. And I think I liked this video better than the video a couple weeks ago, just because I really enjoyed learning about the individual women and how their lives were shaped, through the things that they faced, and how, like, Annie Oakley, she was actually abused for 2 years by her foster parents, and how that really brought things together for her, I guess, where she had to be that fierce, determined, and confident woman.
I know. I thought that was really, really interesting. I never would have suspected that she went through something like that.
And it's just the way that she was able to drag herself out of that. I mean, being abused for 2 years and told your parents don't love you anymore and don't want you back, that would be kind of detrimental.
Oh, absolutely. My mind would be like totally brainwashed. But then you look at other people like Belle Starr, who was just a woman just trying to live a normal life, and reality just absolutely would not let her. And even after her death, it all just like spiraled out of control, which I thought was absolutely crazy.
I would have to say her choice of husbands too was kind of messed up. It was like one felon, one wanted person, you know, one after another. I'm like, come on, lady, you want a real life? Just pick somebody that's normal.
Yeah, and even the strangers coming through. I mean, you got Wild Bill, you got the Indian and Indian Joe, and I was like, lost cause.
Well, I guess it said in the video that she wanted the ability to stay on the Indian reservation, and the only way that she could was to be able to, you know, be a part of that through marriage or however it was. But I don't know. Her choice of husbands for me just kept making me cringe.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, do you have anything you want to add? Any questions you want to ask?
I think I put everything on the questionnaire that I can think of. I can't think of anything right off the hand.
Okay. Well, we're about at 15 minutes, if not already there, so we're good to go.
Sweet.
All right. So I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Sounds good. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.